Why do worms come out when it rains? Well, the short answer is it helps them move faster, but understanding that answer is going to take a little bit more explaining. If you ever learned about worms in school, you probably learned that they come out of the ground when the rain's falling because all of the water goes down into the soil and kind of floods them out, so they have to come out to avoid drowning. This isn't entirely true though, because some species of earthworms can live for up to 2 weeks fully submerged in water. So that's only partially correct. So the next possible theory is that when the rain hits the ground, it mimics the sound of a mole digging through the dirt trying to hunt the worms. So to avoid this mole, the worms come up to the surface where there's no mole and just rain. But once again, this isn't entirely correct either, because even if it's a light misty rain with no big raindrops hitting the ground, the worms will still come out. And this leads us to the final, most accepted scientific definition. And that is, the worms come out because when the rain falls, the surface ground is nice and moist, which allows them to move across it without drying out. This extra movement range allows them to find new potential areas to settle in, as well as find mates. Surprisingly, these aren't the only ways that you can make worms come out of the ground. There's a technique that has been developed called worm grunting, where you get a piece of wood that you hammer into the ground and then a piece of metal that you rub along the top of this piece of wood. This wood will then vibrate, which mimics the sound of the moles digging through hunting for the worms, as I said earlier, which once again causes the worms to surface. It's a pretty commonly used technique for companies that need worms for fishing, so if you ever find live bait, that's likely how they got the worms. However, if worm grunting doesn't have that pizzazz for you, that shock, well, there's another technique where you basically put live current, you put an electrical current into the ground, and worms don't really like being electrocuted, so they come up to the surface to avoid the electricity. But this worm grunting technique, the metal one, not the one with the electricity, is also emulated by different animals. So there's seagulls that will stomp their little feet on the ground, look like they're doing a little dance, and what they're actually doing is once again mimicking the sound of the mole and getting worms to come up to the surface for them to eat. Another interesting fact I learned about worms while doing research for this video is that the largest species of worm lives in Australia. Surprisingly, I know every weird animal lives there, but these worms can grow to be over 10 feet long, which is ridiculous, a 10-foot long worm. Another odd thing about them is when they move around, they make a sound like running water or like the water being drained out of a bathtub. So if you're really curious to hear that sound, check out this video linked by a researcher who studies these worms. Coming to the end of this video, you probably know quite a bit more about worms than you did at the start, but focusing back on our main point, now you know why worms come out of the ground when it rains.